And now to developments in the case of a Gilbert teen whose family members took him out of the country guided by doomsday delusions. The teenager involved was found safe in Alaska. Today, the teen's mom, Spring Thibodeau, and uncle, Brooke Hale, both entered not guilty pleas. They're both facing charges of taking the teen without permission. Investigators believe the family left Gilbert and headed to Idaho before going into Canada and ultimately toward Alaska. Court documents accuse Hale and Thibodeau of having extreme doomsday beliefs, believing the teenager had a role in the second coming of Jesus Christ. So joining me again in studio for a legal deep dive into these new developments is Hector Diaz of Diaz Law. So the mom and the uncle in question, family members of this teenager, are facing custodial interference offenses. So what does that mean?
Simply put, it means taking a child or say somebody who has got some kind of developmental concerns or issues from lawful custody of another person.
Okay.
So in this case, the father here who lives here in Arizona has likely has some kind of parent plan or some kind of court order saying that the son is to be in his custody.
Okay.
Right.
So a custody issue there. And then also, I mean, what level of offense are we talking when we're talking about custodial interference in this case?
Well, in this situation, the mother, and also I think it's the mother's boyfriend, acted here knowing that there was an order in place that prohibited, them from taking the child because the father has custody. It's a felony. It's a class 4 felony in the case of the mother, and I think it's a class 3 felony in the case of the boyfriend because he's not a parent, and they took the child out of the state of Arizona. So it's pretty serious. I mean, these kinds of offenses come potentially with confinement, probation. I mean, there's all sorts of consequences here for these two.
A slew of punishments to be determined, obviously, but the details, when we talk about doomsday beliefs, obviously eerily similar to the Lori Vallow case, obviously not nearly as severe as the teenager was found safe in Alaska and is now back home in Gilbert. But what happens to the discussion when doomsday beliefs become part of that conversation?
I think we saw it when these two individuals came up for before the court to determine their release conditions. This judge, I believe, issued a bail in both cases of $500,000, $500,000,
which we were discussing off air. Very high.
It is high for the level of felony, and personally having defended these kinds of matters before, a $500,000 bail indicates that this judge read some really alarming, concerning doomsday type information. Also, maybe the concern here being that this mother and her boyfriend have some mental health concerns and mental health issues that could be underlying some of these concerns.
Yeah, a disturbing case that will continue to develop and follow. Another thing that we wanted to discuss while we have you here in studio during 2 major holidays, a lot of people probably getting Apple Watches or maybe not because of the ongoing litigation with that. So why is Apple being sued for patent infringement?
So it's a really interesting case where essentially you have a situation where another company, Massimo, which is a medical device maker, who essentially sued Apple and said, you are using our patent, our technology in terms of inputting it in some of the new Apple iWatches. And this really pertains to the Series 9 and I think it's called the Ultra 2 Apple watches.
Right.
And so essentially what happened was they said, and it goes a little deeper in terms of indicating that not only did they steal their technology, but that they actually use some of their former employees now at Apple to implement some of this technology in their watches.
And so how do you see this playing out in court as it does continue to move forward?
Well, what's really interesting here is the PR hit that Apple's taking.
Right.
Apple's known for being at the forefront of technology, coming out with all these new ideas, and here
sales.
It's all in the lawsuit that really how they implemented and how they designed this was by stealing, employees at another company. So I think Apple's going to want to, they're taking tremendous hits in terms of sales here, so they're going to want to do a workaround in terms of figuring out how to get around this issue.
All right, another one we'll continue to watch. Hector Diaz, thank you for being in studio.